Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jasched. I am your host, Jess, and today, before we get into our conversation, into today's episode, actually, I just realized they're linked a little bit, so this is good. But before we get into the episode and the topic, I wanted to remind you that there are two other ways you can access working with me in this moment that isn't the more intensive one-on-one coaching or anything else. That is the Get Jasched Meditation Plus podcast subscription, which is attached to this podcast, but it is a small subscription fee monthly for weekly guided meditation episodes that you can follow, go through, do one by one, go back to the ones that you enjoyed, try out, all of those sorts of things. It is designed specifically for people who are busy, who maybe have struggled with meditation, or who, even if you haven't struggled with meditation, who just wants something simple and accessible and approachable that you can dive into. So they are there. You get a new episode every Thursday at the time of recording and of this episode coming out. There are 6 episodes there already, 6 guided meditations for you to explore. We go over breathing styles and breath work. There is a meditation for deep sleep there. There is a meditation for relaxation. There's other forms there that you can explore. So that is there. I will include the link in the show notes for you to go on and subscribe should you want to, and you will have access to that entire library for as long as you have the subscription. The other way is if you are in Brisbane or decide you want to be in Brisbane for this, I'm holding a 3-hour workshop in Brisbane on Friday morning, the 24th of April, 2026, and it is called Regulated Leaders Resilient Teams. It is limited to only 14 people, and we have had a couple of spots sell, so make sure you get yourself registered if you want to join. It is 3 hours for you to learn about the nervous system in context to you and your experience as a leader, as a business owner, as a director, and then learn tools that work for you personally that you can use, or tells that you can use to figure out what you need sooner, because then you can make better decisions sooner. And then you'll also be able to take away things that you can take with you into your team, not as anyone's therapist, unless you actually are, and then, you know, this is probably a redundant point for you, but not as anyone's therapist or trying to be, but as a leader. So that is on Friday morning, the 24th of April from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. in Brisbane City. Again, I'll have the link below for you to have a look at that one and register if you would like a spot. Now, today's topic is actually about proactive mindfulness. And I know that I have likely mentioned some version of this in almost every single episode in some way, but it's time we really addressed it head on. And this is partly inspired by me doing my research proposal in my final semester of my master's and coming across research and sources and studies that consistently indicate that when we are proactive with mindfulness practices, and I mean mindfulness, I don't mean strictly meditation, I don't mean anything hippie woo woo, not that we're hating on that, but just for people to really understand the robustness of these studies. The results have come consistently, or shown consistently, that when participants in high stress environments or workplaces, and these are specifically participants in defense forces, so you can imagine, if you don't know it, you can at least imagine the kind of high stress that defense can be. But these are participants in defense forces, and they have found that when mindfulness training and practices are done consistently ahead of a stressful event happening or a stress being incurred, a significant stress, those participants are much more likely to be able to navigate that stress without necessarily as much of the negative outcomes or impacts that can happen. It doesn't mean there's none, because we are human, but I really want to talk about being proactive in our own lives, because oh boy, sometimes stress is one of those things, particularly in workplaces, where it's only really looked at once people start reporting feeling stressed or being stressed. It's only really looked at once it's at that point of being reportable, or, you know, in some instances, an actual experience or event that has happened that has caused that stress. And I guess over the last almost 2 years of doing my master's, and this is stuff that I was more or less doing beforehand, right? But diving into the actual research, it's just become more and more clear to me how important it is to be proactive rather than waiting for the pain point. And sometimes we'll just be in the pain point, and that's okay, we can address it then anyway. But where we can, being proactive about well-being, being proactive about mindfulness and what it can do for us, rather than waiting for the pain point. Because, you know, we never want to be as proactive about avoiding hangovers, for example, until we're in the midst of a fucking hangover. We never want to be as proactive about how much we drink, going with that, until we are the next morning feeling awful. If you are sober, I'd barely drink anymore anyway, but that might be part of the reason, is because I just don't like being hungover or feeling hungover or being unwell. We never, feel as motivated and clear in taking care of our health as we do when we are struck down with the flu and just feeling really rough and rotten and a bit like us. You know, we're never as motivated until we are feeling the pain, so to speak. And part of that's human, right? And that's, we're not, as I said, we're not hating on that either. But if we are able to, just like we ideally drink enough water each day to avoid dehydration or to avoid headaches or to stay healthy and hydrated or whatever it is, right? Just like we drink enough water each day, or we ideally eat enough food as we're able to be nourished, we can practice things that reinforce our foundations and support structures of the quote building that we are, the structure that we are, the being that we are. We can do things that help support that foundation for us, that again doesn't necessarily make us, well, no, not even necessarily. It does not make us inhuman. It does not make us invincible. It does not make us infallible. But when we build our structures and support and strengthen those things, we have more tools to be able to then navigate things with at least a little more ease, or with at least a little more adaptation as we need to. And yes, there are extreme things. There are certain things in the world that come to mind, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, extreme stuff happens. And that a lot of those things we can't control. But I'm talking, if I may, because it's all I can do in this format, I'm talking about general day-to-day, workplaces in particular, because workplaces arguably have a responsibility that they must take here to do this for their team, rather than just waiting for people to be stressed and then going, here's your EAP, your employee assistance program, go get 5 sessions of free therapy, or whatever it is. And again, love that, but what are we doing systemically, proactively, that is a preventative? Because we don't need to wait for people to be burnt out before we start paying attention. So I use this example in a lot of mental health education sessions that I do with Livin. But I use this example a lot. I often share about my experience with my very first panic attack. And it's a very quick story because it came on suddenly, or what I thought was suddenly. I was at work, I was working, trying to work. This is a long time ago, over a decade ago. I've stopped counting at this point, but over a decade ago. And I was slouching, so like my lungs weren't expanding enough to breathe, and I wasn't paying attention to any of those body signals. I was trying to work, or maybe going through the motions, but then also my mind was totally elsewhere. It was completely elsewhere, trying to probably overthink its way through all of the things or problems I thought it had at the time. And all of a sudden I was hit with this surge, not even a rush, a surge of panic that was like, I have to move, you have to move, you have to move. There was nowhere else. It was, you have to move. And I all of a sudden was power walking down the street for 10 minutes because I had this panic of, I need to move. I don't know what will happen if I don't, but I need to. And it was panic, and it was scary, and it was overwhelming. I was safe, it was daytime, it was fine, but also I didn't know what it was. And then that's really, I'd always, been interested in emotional well-being and mental health in some way anyway, but that's what really led me to start learning a lot of what I do now. You don't have to make this your special interest. I'm using this as an example though, because that's when I started learning a lot of what I do now in different ways. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a therapist, to be very clear, but learning about well-being, learning about emotional health and emotional well-being and mindfulness and stress and things that are useful and things that are maybe not so useful, but we do because they feel useful in the moment, all of that, right? And it's the biggest hot tip ever. Who knew overthinking doesn't actually help? Who knew? We probably all do to a degree, but when you're in it, you can overthink, and that's then what can happen. That's what happened to me. And then I go into the comparison, because from that to my next anxiety attack, I experienced anxiety, but I didn't have an attack as such in a long time, until it was about 2 years ago. And I was on a plane, and I was on my way home. I was in a window seat, and we'd started descending, so I was almost home. And this might have been part of the reason I have forever had ear issues. So when a plane starts to descend, there is always a risk of deep, bad pain, like very bad pain. I don't need answers. I understand what's going on. So, but that's what actually started happening. The pain started, and it doesn't happen every time because I have things that I do, and it just happened to happen this time. And with that, I'd had a big few days with clients in Melbourne, and it was really good and it was really fulfilling, but I was probably feeling a bit depleted. And then the pain started. So I noticed, this was my experience then, I noticed the anxiety build up quite quickly, like a wave. What it wasn't was panic. It didn't have the same panic element as it did the first time I experienced that whole attack. Who knows? I might have had those attacks previously and just not really registered it. Who knows? I don't. Maybe I'll have a memory and it will reveal, more. But at this point, that's how I mark it. And it wasn't this time more recently. It wasn't panic. It was just the anxiety. And I say just, look, we don't have to like it. We don't have to enjoy the experience. I certainly wasn't. But the experience was different because I was different and I had learned more and I had navigated these tools more and gotten to know these tools more and practice it. Not just because I teach it, but because I practiced it. I started by practicing. So when the anxiety happened this time, I didn't have the panic because I was able to first name what was happening. I noticed what was happening. So I was able to go, oh, in my mind, more or less, this sounds, I'm being literal when I say in my mind, I was able to go, oh, it seems like I'm having an anxiety attack. I wasn't laughing about it at the time. I was crying, but I had this moment where I was like, oh, okay, it's an anxiety attack. Okay. Oh, this is happening. And it was kind of an acceptance in a way, because this happening while you're in the window seat of a plane with who seemed like a lovely couple next to me. I'm going to assume that they were lovely. You're in the window seat and you're wearing a mask, because I only fly with masks now, because I don't need to get everyone's germs all the time, and it makes me feel a lot better when I fly. But I'm in the window seat, we start descending, and it's like, oh, it seems like I'm having an anxiety attack. Okay, great. Okay. And it was a bit like watching a big wave build that you kind of know you're going to be dumped on a little by. But then at the same time, simultaneously, you also know that the wave is going to pass and you are going to be okay. You are going to come up for air. Like it's not a fatal wave. It's not a fatal situation. It is just, okay, this is going to suck for a moment. I'm not going to like it for a moment. And then it will pass. So literally from the moment we started descending was the moment my ears started doing their thing and hurting. And then the next moment was the anxiety, the attack coming on. And then that recognition, the naming of it, and then going, okay, what are the tools I need to use? And using them. This is what I mean by the preventative. These are tools I wasn't trying to use brand new in the moment of being stressed the fuck out or anxious as hell. These were tools that I used. I use regularly, even when I'm not feeling stressed or anxious or overwhelmed. Even when I'm feeling really good, I still use the tools, because we don't want to have the relationship with these mindfulness tools that they are only there for when we feel bad, because then when we practice them, we have the thought of, well, something must be wrong. I must feel bad because I'm practicing it. And that's not necessary. It's not always true. So I started doing my deep breaths in, my long exhales out. I wasn't holding my breath. Sometimes that is a practice, but sometimes that adds to anxiety. Wasn't doing that. Not doing that. So I was just exhaling out, but I wasn't trying to stretch it to the point of force either, because that would have added more anxiety. And I know that enough about myself. So I was able to, okay, slow, steady breaths, deep diaphragmatic breaths, long exhales to whatever that point is that works for me. Anchoring in, gently squeezing my own arms and my own legs. And honestly, that's all I could do, because I was on a plane. I was in a window seat. There was no big fuss. I don't know if anyone noticed. I had tears, and I don't know if it was the pain or the anxiety, or I would guess probably both, because it was just like, well, I was feeling sad and sorry for myself. So maybe my neighbors noticed, But like I said, they seem lovely in maybe the sense of giving me my space. I don't know. That's a story, because I don't know. They might not have noticed. But here is the point. I was using tools I had practiced before. I was able to then recognize what was happening, name what was happening. I didn't force myself to like it. I didn't pretend that it was all gravy and everything was great and, oh, I feel so good, and just totally lie, not even gaslight, just totally straight up lie to myself about it. It was none of that. It was literally going, okay, well, this is inconvenient. I'm just going to keep doing what I need to do. Tears were happening, but nothing, nothing more. And I just held myself in it. So my relationship with the really uncomfortable, unpleasant thing shifted. So it didn't have the same panic, but the tools I had practiced had helped me in that moment. And then, yes, of course, I got my luggage, and by the time I got in my car that was waiting for me, as soon as I sat in the car, I started sobbing. That's fine. Sometimes you need that. But I was able to let it move through. And the sobbing was also probably a little bit of relief, because I made it to my safe space, which was my car, mine. But there are some things here that are really important. In the moment, you can use these tools, yes. Even if you haven't used them before, yes. Are you going to likely to think of those tools if you haven't used them before? Unlikely. Possible, sure, but not likely. They might feel overwhelming, or you might not know, but in the moment, yes, you can use the tools, but also it is important to allow yourself to process the stress, the whatever is happening, by letting it move through in a safe way. Being proactive in your mindfulness practice, whatever it is, whether it is breathing, whether it is meditation, whether it's something totally different, being proactive in things that help you practice mindfulness will make it easier for your brain to access those tools when your brain's not actually in cognitive thinking mode as much, right? So it's going to be a lot easier. But also, when you've practiced these things, or when you've learned just enough by maybe listening to this podcast, who knows, by doing that, it will also help you be in a different kind of relationship with the thing. And as I've said, you do not have to like it. No one's forcing you to, but you can be in a different relationship with it and go, okay. Then you can respond sooner to your needs in that moment, which is what I was not doing the first time I had that panic attack. I didn't know better, and that's okay. Like, I'm not mad at my former self for that, because I didn't know what I know now. But you see, like, there is such a difference between preventative mindfulness training and anything stress related that is reactive after the stress has been incurred. Still useful, but in a different way, and not as useful in the moment. And then, so that was slightly more than 2 years ago now. And then 6 months later, at that point, I started my master's, and I started looking at the actual research more and more for myself for this next 2 years, and going, oh, that's what happened. Oh, the research supports proactive, preventative approaches to mindfulness training as more effective in arguably some of the most stressful workplace environments I can imagine. Not only because we haven't even touched on healthcare workers here in this episode, at least, but if I think about defense stresses, that is a life or death stress. It can be significant. And if that was found in those, this is not necessarily an academic opinion here, it's just a logical thought and opinion. But if the research shows that it is effective proactively and preventative in high stress workplaces like military, like defense, then wouldn't you think that logic says to me that then for arguably lesser, not that we're dismissing our own stresses, but for workplaces that have normal workplace stress that maybe shouldn't be normal, but isn't necessarily life and death either, then wouldn't you think that if it was effective in that extreme environment, it would also be effective in the environment that is maybe not so extreme? We just might not notice the effects as much because you always notice it more with the extremes. There's more to notice. But wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you think? Like I said, not necessarily an academic opinion, that second part, but that's an inference I'm making. It's something I'm inferring from the academic research anyway. But it's a thought. It's a thought. It's a thought. It's a thought. What would happen for you as a leader, for you as a team member, for you as an employee, for you as a business owner, for you as a workplace? What would happen if you really actually were proactive about mindfulness interventions, trainings, whatever you want to call it, mindfulness practices for you, for your team, for the well-being, without waiting for it to become a necessity? It's like waiting to engage an accountant once you're in big trouble with the ATO. You wouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. Everyone knows you shouldn't do it. Some people I think probably might, but you wouldn't do it. So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. Hope this is helpful. Next week's our 200th episode, so we are going to have a bit of a celebration episode. But in the meantime, have a lovely week.